Test subject. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, there we go.
I love the energy, guys. Keep it coming.
All right, there we go.
Sweet. All right. Again, my name is Ryan Emrich. Thrilled to be here tonight. Thank you to Simplified Meetups for having me here. I'm going to be talking to you guys tonight a little bit about my real estate investing journey and how I've been able to scale my portfolio, starting from an FHA house hack in Worcester, Massachusetts, and then now kind of getting up to 80 plus units and getting into some bigger deals, including commercial multifamily deals and deals where it's starting to make sense to raise capital from other investors, which we're having a blast doing, and like that we're going to be able to kind of share the wealth as the deals get juicier. Quick kind of background about me before real estate. I was working in public accounting. I got my CPA license, then I worked at a tech company, and I found myself, probably like many people in this room who likely want to get into real estate, I was not really seeing how I was going to build my net worth. And if I was starting to question if I was really providing as much value to myself and to the organizations I was in. So I was starting to think, like, what could I do that was entrepreneurial? And I started thinking about maybe starting a business, started thinking about getting into franchises like food and beverage, Chipotle necessarily not a franchisable franchise, but stuff like that, fast casual type of food. And I eventually talked to a friend who was in the same place as me, back from my public accounting days, and we started talking about real estate. And obviously, I think many of you guys know, there's a lot of awesome ways to get into real estate with not a lot of capital, especially with these owner-occupied loans like the FHA loan, 5% conventional. So that to us kind of seemed like the next best step forward. I didn't want to kind of ponder it too long. I was like, you know what, let's take action. Let's start looking at some multis. So around the end of 2018, my friend and I, we start looking at multis. At the time, I was living in Medford and Somerville. So we started in our own backyard. And if you guys have looked at properties, and especially if you're going in high leverage with like 3.5% down, trying to do the FHA route, we could not find anything that we were underwriting that would cash flow, not even close. And so we eventually worked our way to kind of these secondary markets of Boston, tertiary markets, whatever you want to call them. And we ended up finding something in Worcester that kind of met our criteria. So this is the story of my very first property. This was an FHA house hack by Clark University. It's a triple decker. And we found this on MLS around the beginning of 2019. Seller wanted, I think, $409 for it. We offered $385, and we really liked that because the rents at the time, at least that were being communicated to us, were somewhere around $3,600 a month. So we were like, if you know the 1% rule where you want to try to achieve getting gross market rents to about 1% of your purchase price, it's not a foolproof test, but it's kind of a good back of the envelope test to determine whether or not something is likely going to cash flow, cover its expenses, cover your mortgage payment, etc. So we liked seeing that. We underwrote the deal. We thought that there was some good upside. But it turns out, unfortunately, that the seller wasn't completely honest with us about the rent situation. We did our best during due diligence to verify the leases. So I don't know if you guys have heard of estoppel certificates. It's kind of a legal form you'd have a tenant fill out prior to closing during your due diligence process to verify some of the details in their tenancy agreement with their landlord. And we got those copies, and everything said $1,200. So we weren't expecting any surprises, but we did get surprises. And this is kind of give you an idea of what these units look like. Some of these are kind of cleaned up, so to speak. They weren't pretty by any means, but I've definitely seen worse. So we thought this was a good starting point. It felt like it was going to be a semi-turnkey property that wasn't going to require a lot of work, which we really liked because we were going in with not a lot of money saved up. We put down our 3.5% on this, but we didn't really have a lot in reserves, to be honest. I think maybe we each had like $7K to our name. So we really were trying to avoid any situations where we'd have to expend a lot of money. Within days of closing, I think I said weeks here. They've left, okay. So within days of closing, the third floor tenant is like, we can't afford $1,200 in rent, we're dipping out. And we got a little nervous because yes, we were about to be new landlords, so I think we understood that turnover happens. You have to eventually go through and get new tenants, but I don't think we were quite ready for it, especially where we thought everything was turnkey. So we're like, okay, what do we do? Got to get junk out of the unit, got to turn it over, got to hire painters, got to kind of clean it up. So that was the first thing. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it kind of was getting us nervous because, as I said, we were kind of low on reserves. Second thing, the second floor tenant told us that they weren't paying $1,200 a month, they were paying $500 a month, that the seller forged their signature on the estoppel certificate. And then there was some kind of conflict of interest here where the seller, I guess, was the brother-in-law of one of the guys living in the second floor unit. So then we're like, oh my God, like we just went from a position where we thought we were gonna cash flow $3,600 a month. We're not getting rent on the third floor unit because they're leaving. We know we're gonna have to spend money to turn that over. And then the second floor, they're not paying $1,200, they're paying $500 now. So now we're like, we're only getting $1,700 a month. Our mortgage payment's somewhere around $2,200, $2,400. So we're like, shit, we're gonna lose money every month now. Like it's official. So we're panicking a little bit. And then to add to this a little bit more, so by the way, that ends up with an eviction, and that eviction kind of gets solved over the next 4 months. But still, this is like all transpiring within the first couple months. And we didn't see if the end was in sight. And then the first floor, they were paying on time, but one thing happened with them where they all of a sudden had an electric problem. The ceiling lights all went out in their unit, and we're kind of freaking out because we're like, we're walking it, and we're like, okay, it doesn't really feel habitable. I'm nervous they're gonna call like the Board of Health or something. So we get an electrician in there, and the first electrician tells us some sketchy looking wiring above these drop panel ceilings. We recommend you rewire the whole first floor unit. It's gonna be like $15,000. And like I'm honestly like close to shitting in my pants when I heard that. I was not prepared to do that. We already had money. We knew we had to spend a couple thousand for the eviction that was happening. We knew we were gonna have to spend a couple thousand up here. So like we really just didn't have that wiggle room. And I was like, holy crap, is this like what landlording is about? Like I get my first property and all of a sudden within 2 months, like the whole thing is falling apart. We get a couple more electricians in there. Finally, somebody diagnosed that they found the one point of failure. It was a junction box or something. A mouse had chewed through a wire. It was like $1,000 to fix. Everything started working again. We were very, very grateful of that. And everything kind of started working itself out. We figured out how to turn over the unit. This is kind of photos of the after. It's still not like gorgeous, but we painted everything white, kind of brightened it up, cleaned up the floors, cleaned up the bathroom. And because we were so close to Clark University, it just kind of made sense to start thinking about renting by the bedroom. And so that's what we did. So did that on the third floor, started doing that on the second floor once that evicted tenant kind of got out of there. And we eventually did it on the first floor. So we took this property from going like $1,700 a month when it first started. We thought it was gonna be $3,600. Obviously that didn't happen. But we started off at $1,700 a month. We got it within the next year or so up to $4,500 plus a month. And now we sit on it. We sit on that for like a year and a half. COVID happens. We're not really sure what's gonna happen there. We bought a second property within like 2 months of closing on this one. We each had our FHA eligibility, so we each got a property, and we kind of were splitting things behind the scenes. I don't know if the banks like to hear that, but you know, Jeff and Joe Galvin's not here, so he can't report me. So I don't think Joe would care either. So what ends up happening though is we're like, all right, we did all of this work. We stabilized this property. It was awesome. We got more cash flow, right? Like that's obviously great, but we ultimately didn't feel, or we didn't factually do anything to really increase the market value of the property. We had done all this work. It was great for us as owners, but in the eyes of another investor or a bank or an appraiser, this property wasn't necessarily going to be worth more money. Now we lucked out because obviously during COVID appreciation, we lucked out there, but I was realizing that this wasn't really a repeatable model in the sense that this wasn't a good candidate to BRRRR. If I wanted to go in, and I think probably everybody understands the BRRRR strategy, but if you don't, this is a stabilization strategy where effectively the goal is to get your money out of a property within a certain period of time. And the acronym, I don't have it up here, but it's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And it doesn't always have to be exactly like that, but the end goal is you get your down payment out, maybe a little extra money. So we're like, okay, well, what are the next steps? So my partner and I, we kind of have a falling out. We have a disagreement on where we want to go with kind of the business. And so I say, okay, you know what? Like, let's just go our separate ways. You take your property, I'll take my property. And I start thinking about what my next steps are. Around this time, I start learning about commercial multifamily real estate. And Jeff, you might be able to speak to this a little bit more, but what I was realizing in the commercial multifamily space versus the residential space is those properties are generally valued differently. So with residential, 1 to 4 units, 2 to 4 units, multifamily, but it's generally going to be valued based off the sales comparison approach. So even though our triple decker had $4,500 a month in rents, the one next door might be only getting $3,200 a month in rents. But in the eyes of kind of the general market, it's not necessarily going to trade my property at $4,500. It's not necessarily going to trade for a higher price. With commercial real estate, there's a lot of asset classes in commercial real estate, right? You could do self-storage, you could do warehouses, you can do mobile home parks. But once you get to this 5+ unit range, it's considered commercial multifamily real estate. And that real estate is generally valued using the amount of income that the property is generating. So a higher, more profitable NOI, net operating income, more cash flow, in the eyes of the bank, in the eyes of an appraiser, in the eyes of another investor who are really buying these for profit, right? They're not buying them to own or occupy them. They're going to be more valuable. The bank will look at it and say, okay, you've made this property's cash flowing, it's throwing off more cash, it can support higher debt payments. So we may come to you, or us, an investor who owns a commercial multifamily building. If they wanted to do the BRRRR strategy, what they could do is they could increase the NOI, raising the rents, rehabbing the units. They could go back to the bank and say, hey, we've made this more profitable. We'd like to do a cash out refinance, and the bank will appraise it, and it's probably going to appraise for a good chunk more, simply just because of raising the income. And so this to me was like kind of an aha moment. I said to myself, yeah, I could go maybe sell my building or do some type of cash out refinance, try to go do something that's owner occupied. But if I really want to get the most bang for my buck, I will really want to start thinking about this commercial multifamily stuff. All right, so what's next? So now I've got this idea. I'm like, okay, I think I want to do a BRRRR on a commercial multifamily, 5+ units. And I've got this property in Worcester. And the property in Worcester is actually cash flowing well. So what I decide to do is I decide to refinance one out of the FHA loan into just a typical normal investment loan, owner-occupied loan. I was still living there. And get rid of the PMI and lock into a lower interest rate. Again, totally lucked out on this. It's just COVID. The rates are low. So that's the first thing I do. But I do this knowing that there's a way for me to tap into the equity that I have in my FHA multifamily. And that's through a home equity line of credit. I weighed the options. If I did a cash out refinance on this, there wasn't going to be a lot of cash to pull out. But I could do a higher leveraged HELOC that would allow me to pull out some money. So I go to a credit union. I don't know where they're based out of. It's like DC or Virginia. They'll do HELOCs, home equity lines of credit, up to 95% of the appraised value of your building. And if you don't know what a HELOC is, it's a line of credit just like a credit card, but it's secured by your property rather than just like personal guarantee or your personal credit. So I go to this bank and I say, hey, I've got this property that I'm owner occupying. It's a 3-family. Could you guys come do an appraisal and then give me a line of credit? And they do that. They send out the appraiser for coming out to come out to appraise it. And I ended up getting approved for a line of credit for $120,000, which I don't, by the way. Like, you get this line of credit, you don't necessarily have to use it. It just sits there, kind of like you have a credit limit on a credit card. But if you choose to draw on it, you have that option. So I'm like, all right, this is cool. I've got this idea. I want to do commercial multifamily. I'm viewing this as a way to potentially scale. I'm viewing it as a way to BRRRR and pull money out. And now I've got a line of credit. So where am I now? We're in June of 2021. And I'm really thinking to myself too, I'm like, I'm alone now, right? My partner kind of went our separate ways, my investing partner. And I don't really have a big network. I wasn't going to meetups like this. I didn't really have a lot of resources to ask questions to. I didn't know other investors. I view that as a huge weakness. So I said, you know what? I need to surround myself with like-minded people and start going to some of these meetups. And so in 2021, I go to one of these Simplified Real Estate Meetup events. And I think it was like the very first meeting in 2021 in Nashua when you guys started doing these events again. The events started opening up after COVID. And I think they started in New Hampshire first before Massachusetts allowed for it. And at the very first meetup, I meet this kid, Matt Davis. Matt Davis is like, I was impressed by this. He's a younger guy than me at the time. And he had just closed on 2 properties at once, and they were his very first properties. The first was a 2-family out in Lowell, Massachusetts, that he was using an FHA loan to house hack. But the second was a 6-unit apartment building. And I go to talk to Matt. I'm like, that's so cool that you're buying a 6-unit apartment building. You're like 24, 25. How are you doing this? I told him I was thinking of doing it. He's like, oh, I actually raised the money from some friends and family, put together, underwrote the deal. I think that's going to be a good candidate to stabilize and then go do a BRRRR on. And I was like, that's awesome. I've been thinking about doing the same thing. But there's another cool thing about commercial real estate is the bank is less picky about where the money comes from. And Jeff, I don't know if you fully agree with that, but that's kind of been my experience is as long as you have a competent team that can execute on the deal, they're more so concerned about the deal itself, that it can support the expenses, that it can pay the debt service, and not so much as about the individual credit, the credit of the individuals that might be buying the property. They don't necessarily care about your personal income. They don't necessarily care as much about your credit score. It's definitely not, they don't care at all, but they care less. So
you're right. It is about the property and the ability for the property to produce cash flow.
awesome, thank you. And by the way, I know I'm kind of going, guys. If anybody has questions at any point, feel free to interrupt, raise a hand, or do anything. But
Doing great.
thank you, Ken. Thank you. Question in the back, yeah.
The board signature, do you have any recourse on the grantee?
I mean, I think technically, right, but I'd have to prove that in court. And it just seemed like it was legal fees that we didn't have resources for. I think we talked to our landlord-tenant attorney we were using. Christine Abraham, by the way, out of Worcester County. She was in Worcester, now she's in Leominster. She's an awesome attorney for evictions. We didn't feel like there was going to be something that we could do there. We tried to call the seller, and because we had his contact information, and that didn't go anywhere. So we just said, you know what, like, it's just kind of water under the bridge. Let's just move on and try to get this thing stabilized. But really, I was like, I don't know. I would assume that would be like 5 or 10K potentially in legal fees to like start a lawsuit like that. So I didn't want to do that. Any other questions? I like this. Good question. Thank you for it. No. All right. Well, if any questions, just raise a hand. Shoot up a hand. All right. So I'm talking with Matt, and I think what Matt's doing is cool. And I'm learning like, okay, well, this means we could find a deal like this, or I could find a deal like this. Yeah, I could use my HELOC for it, but I could also raise money for a deal like that if it's 5+ units. So Matt likes kind of that I'm into the same things that he's into, and he says, hey, what do you think about starting a weekly mastermind together? We'll get like one other guy. We'll meet each week. We'll do an accountability group. We'll go through on a weekly basis, talk about our highs and lows, some of the goals that we're working on individually. It wasn't like a promise to do any type of partnership together, but it was just a way for us to start talking about real estate and kind of keep each other accountable. So we do that. And one of my goals is to find off-market real estate deals. I want to find a commercial multifamily that I can do that's burrable. So I want there to be some value-add component to it. And I am like learning about this, and I realized that one of the ways you can do that is by going direct to an owner of a building and trying to, just asking, hey, you've owned this thing 10 years. Are you interested in selling it? And some people get burnt out. Some people just they're ready for it. So we do that. Or I do that. I start sending out letters, and I start hand stuffing envelopes at first, and then I find services where they can print and mail them for you, and I start getting leads. And so with those leads, Matt and this other guy in the group, John's a contractor. He's a little older than us. He's got some family, some multifamily already. He's awesome. He's got his own development business. He's already doing flips, condo conversion, stuff like that. I think he just brings a good skill set to the mastermind group because rehabs and things that are more extensive like that, I had less experience with. So it felt good to me to have him there, especially as I was also starting to think about at this time doing another owner-occupied property, like using a rehab loan, FHA 203K, for example. 5% conventional now has one. I think it's like home style or something like that. But that's where I liked having John in the group. So Matt and John are like, hey, you're starting to get leads. What do you think about trying to tackle one of these together? So that's what we do. I'm going to skip through this stuff. This is all about the kind of the partnership, benefits to a partnership. But we say, hey, we got a lead for a 6-unit building in Ayer, Massachusetts. We thought it was at a really good price, so we decided to tackle it together. And so I'm going to jump into a deal deep dive on this deal, which I was kind of hoping I could surprise you guys with the bottom stuff, but it all popped up at once. So that's all right. No, you're good. You're good. So this is a 6-unit apartment building in Ayer on William Street. And these were 2 photos up here that were supposed to kind of give you an idea of what the before photos look like. I think this is probably good enough. The units weren't horrendous, but they definitely needed a little TLC if we wanted to get top of market rents. So our plan here was to purchase this, to go in and do some type of budget, or have some type of budget for a rehab, and then get the units looking like this, which these are actually photos from the units that we turned over. So we did cosmetic stuff really, just if the cabinets were crap, we got them out of there, put in new white cabinets, granite countertops, the kind of classic landlord unit turn, the gray LVP floors, light gray paint, white trim, that good stuff. So we do this, and we're starting to turn over the units. We did have to think about, though, where we wanted to get the money for the rehab. We wanted to potentially get it from the bank with a construction loan. We thought about bringing the money ourselves, but ultimately there was somebody in our network at the time that kind of wanted to put their money in real estate but didn't want to become a landlord. So they said, hey, I'll let you borrow the money from me for 2 years with a promissory note, pay me 8% interest. And we said, yeah, that's cool with us, we'll do that. So our plan, by the way, is to do this in 1 year. So we're like 2 years is kind of extra wiggle room for us to get through this and not really feel uncomfortable with the fact, we've got debt payments or, a note that's payable at the end. So we go and we do this. We get the rents from $3,600 to $9,300. And we go back to the bank. We say, hey, we've increased the income. We'd like to do a cash out refinance. The bank comes back with an appraisal. We felt it was low, but it ultimately achieved what we wanted to. Interest rates are rising at this time. I think that probably played into a little bit with the low appraisal. But ultimately, we got 183 out within like 14 months after buying this property. And that covered us getting back our down payment, and it covered paying back the private money lender the money for their note. So we're like, awesome, we did this. We proved that this BRRRR strategy is scalable. And now what? Like, let's go try to do this again, or let's go try to find a bigger deal. So we start talking and we're like, all right, well, realistically, we're gonna limit our growth if we only look to our own personal capital for every deal. Because either we have to go to work or whatever, save up money, go buy a deal together, or we have to do a BRRRR. But I'm like, well, what if we want to buy a deal that's large and so large that we don't actually have the resources to put together ourselves? So we start thinking about all the ways that we can raise money from people, other people, using OPM, other people's money, to put deals together. And so we come up with these three. I already talked about private lending. We did that promissory note on the last page. But then we were like, okay, there's technically two others, is joint ventures and syndications. Joint ventures, you're just getting together with a couple other investors. Maybe somebody brings the money, somebody brings the expertise. You can link up, do a deal together. But then we also found out about syndications, and I would think a lot of you guys have probably heard about syndications, real estate syndications. These are larger deals where general partners, see yes over here, Jane, you've heard of syndications. Ever invested in one out of curiosity? Nice, all right. How was the experience?
I'm still doing it.
Still doing it, okay. So far so good though?
7 years, 139% return.
Wow, that's stellar, by the way. That's good. All right. So we're like, I'm learning about syndications, and I realize that they're a powerful tool to tackle larger deals where you can raise money from a lot of investors and not have to worry about each of the investors having an opinion that they want to offer in the deal. They come in strictly as passive limited partners, but for that privilege, there's some restrictions, and you have to file documents with the SEC, hire a securities attorney, so there is some upfront administrative cost that comes with this. But I'm like, you know what? This is sexy. I want to try to do this for 2023. So at the beginning of 2023, I'm setting my goals for the year. And I'm like, I want to do a syndication. So I want to say that I've done a real estate syndication. It just so happens, I'm still doing the direct mail. We find an opportunity in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and I've got a photo of it here. It's a portfolio of 12 buildings, a little over 65 units. And the seller needs to sell this. We actually sent the letter to a deceased individual. His family member got it. He had recently passed away, and he had quite the portfolio in New Bedford. And they were required to sell the portfolio as part of winding down the estate. So I say, okay, this seems like a great opportunity. I think we can get this under contract for a very competitive price, which in fact we do. I think we end up buying these for like $83,000 or $84,000 a unit, when everything in New Bedford's trading like at $100,000 plus a unit, depending on the condition. But we felt like it was very good. There was equity on day one. So we had to put together a team though to tackle this. And we end up collaborating. Am I allowed to say this? I don't think you guys care. Millennium Holding Group. We approach Millennium Holding Group and we say, hey, we've got this great deal, but we really want a solid team to take this down. And so they say, yeah, let's joint venture syndicate this together, and we'll execute on it. And so that's what we've been doing the last like 7 or 8 months. We've been able to return a little over $300,000 back to investors. The properties are getting stabilized. They're starting to cash flow. We've sold off a couple of the buildings. The smaller buildings, we realized there's a good opportunity to just get some of that trapped equity by getting them cleaned up and then selling them to maybe some owner-occupied type of buyers. So set this goal for 2023. We hit it. I'm like, yeah, this is freaking awesome. Thank you for the clap. I appreciate it, Eric. And now I'm like, all right, I think we've kind of figured out a little rhythm here. Like we can kind of say the deal's sweet enough. We can raise money from people and continue to also do BRRRRs though. Like the BRRRRs are still there. We can still continue to use our own money, but we're also starting to prove that we can put together deals where we can raise money from other people. So these are a couple projects, by the way, I just want to finish up with that I have in the works right now. One of them is this BRRRR that it's another BRRRR. So I showed you guys the 6-unit in Ayer. This is a 6-unit in Worcester that we took down last year. The rents were really low. at $6,500 a month. There were some insane problem tenants in there. This place used to be filled with gang members prior to us buying it, but we did a Google search on the property address. 1 year, the property had like the police come to it 172 times, something insanely crazy. So it was becoming a nuisance property, and I think the city was actually thinking of taking it away from one of the prior owners. But it got cleaned up a little bit with the last owner. We then bought it. The tenants were okay. They still aren't the best, and we're working on getting them out of there. But we've currently got the rents up to $9,200, and stabilized, we should be very easily able to get to $1,300, and it'll make it a great property to do a burr on, go back to do a cash out refinance. Jeff, I may talk to you maybe for a term sheet for that. And then we've also got a single family flip under contract in Maynard that we're going to be doing. So we had some investors in our network that were like, you know what, we want to invest, but we don't necessarily want to put our money in for 2, 3, 4 years, as might be the case with kind of a longer term hold project. We had John Marchese in our team who has this awesome experience with flipping and rehabbing. So we said, hey, let's leverage that experience and let's tackle a flip opportunity together. So we're raising money for that right now, and we're super excited about this. This is a proper hoarder house that you'd see on like Hoarders, the TV show. There's junk everywhere. There was bugs walking around. I mean, it needs a good clean out, but it's going to make an awesome starter home for somebody in Maynard, Mass. So, by the way, I was really happy to hear that single families under $1 million are going off the market right now, because that's what we hope to do here. So if you guys know anybody that's going to want a 5-bedroom single family in Maynard, feel free to talk to me, because I think this is going to be a good property for you guys. Sorry, so closing remarks. Really, I did target on those first 2 properties for a reason, because that FHA loan taught me how to stabilize a property, and that was really what got me into the game. And we lucked out a little bit with that equity, which I then was able to tap into to start getting into bigger deals. But what I really realized was it was through commercial multifamily where we could kind of force the appreciation of properties through implementing a business plan that I realized that we could scale faster and even start raising money to do deals together. And so that's really been my approach now. Like, those are the types of deals I'm really looking for. Obviously, it's a bit harder to do it for like a single family flip. You can still burr those, but I see the forced appreciation route with the 5+ units to be a great strategy. And something that I think you guys should consider if you are looking to scale your portfolio, because it really seems like there's a clear path to burring in that area. It's not that it can't be done with the 2 to 4 unit residential, and I think it's an awesome place to start. And I still look for properties like that. I use that FHA eligibility. I ended up using that in Medford for a 3-family I got, which I'm going to do another presentation, I think in April or May at Lowell, where I'm going to talk about an FHA 203K property that I bought. But yeah, that's kind of the story, guys. I'm pretty active on social media with posting about real estate, the projects that I'm working on, as well as kind of tips and tricks of the trade. So if you guys want to follow me on Instagram or TikTok, it's at Ryan R. Emrich. Blue Canyon, my core investing team, we also have a monthly newsletter that we started up this year. We talk about some things going on in the real estate market. We talk about projects that we're working on, talk about projects that we looked at. I think we kept it short. I know I value your time, so we didn't want this to be like an insanely long newsletter that I knew nobody was going to read. Maybe you still don't read it, but it's literally like each one is like less than a 5-minute read. So it was kind of designed like that. And you can go to our website or scan that QR code to find that newsletter or how to subscribe to it. So that's just kind of the story. Oh, yeah, let's go, Eric. What is it?
Recommend somebody who's very young. What's the best approach? Like, what would you have done differently in order to advance your multi-family investment? Like, what do you wish you hope for? Like, people, like, let's say, for example, or here, like myself, I'm 22.
Yeah.
My goal is to invest my first multi-family.
Yeah.
Doing a first-time home buyer's course, so I could probably leverage that.
For sure.
What would you recommend people like my age and to get started in real estate? Like, the fears, because normally, again, it's big money, but one thing you blew my mind away that you use other people's money. That what blew my mind away.
Yeah.
When you said that, you really split my brain in half for a second. I was like, what? No, in order to acquire a deal.
No, for sure. That's quite.
I'm surprised you're still talking.
I know, that's what I'm trying to make sense right now. Logic right now. I'm like, wow.
So first, I would say that you just being here, and Eric, by the way, he came up to like immediately as soon as he saw me. So props to you for just making that introduction. Like I said, I wasn't going to real estate meetups when I first started looking. I was leveraging my friend. We were bouncing ideas off of each other, but we did not have an extensive network whatsoever. So when problems came up, that's why I was like on the verge of crapping my pants when I found out about the electric thing, because I just didn't know what to do. Like I was like, all I can do is call more electricians, but I didn't have people around me who could kind of settle me down or calm me down. Especially the same thing with like the eviction. We had to go out and find an eviction attorney on our own. Had no idea who to call, had no idea where to look. Same thing with turning over the unit. So just being here, I think building a network of resources around you, experienced investors, like Todd, anybody in here, getting a good investor-focused real estate agent to help you out. Candor has awesome agents. I did not have an investor-focused agent. I used my roommate. My roommate had just got his real estate license, and I was rationalizing, whatever, like, you're not underwriting the deal, I'm underwriting the deal. Like, what are you going to do for me? Totally the wrong mindset. Like, having somebody who can kind of tell you, show you what to look for in a property, like as you're walking around. They give you a different lens, a different perspective. Having somebody that just has experience. They've underwritten deals before. They can tell you if they think the numbers are going to work. These are things that I think bring a lot of value to a first-time investor. So those are things I would absolutely recommend. First-time home buying course, I think will help, but not as much as I think having more investors in your network. Yeah, and ask people to, by the way, ask people to grab a coffee too. Like, I do this all the time. I got coffee with David. I've gotten coffee with Artem. Like, I just say, if I think, yeah, just meet people. Huge thing. For sure. Like what, $15 for a couple coffees? Unfortunately, that's the price of coffees these days, it seems like. But $15, you have a great 2-hour conversation with somebody, and now you're on their radar, and maybe they're even willing to give you advice. So.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, Jeff.
Compliment you. I'm one of the investors in New Bedford projects.
Woo! Thank you very much, Chef. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Flip up to New Bedford. I was going to bring this up at the end, but this deal, as you were talking about it, it just got my brain spinning because you look around this room. How did I go full-time real estate investing? I went to a meetup. How did I meet you?
Meetup.
The meetups. How did we do this deal? Because we knew each other from the meetups. We were referred to Jeff through somebody that we met at a meetup. He did a cost segregation. We not only did his cost segregation studies, he became an investor in our deals. We now sit on the board of Swim with a Mission together. We met Matt Rubito, who runs our property management division. Like, just in this room, and this deal kind of summarizes it. We have investment partners, referral partners, employees and coworkers. And this is not that big of a deal, but it proves the power of getting yourself to these types of events. It didn't cost you anything to come here other than your time.
I heard about this New Bedford deal at the Manchester meetup. I heard Andrew talking about it.
Andrew Freed, yep.
And within a week or two, I had written a check to be
Wow.
one of the investors.
So you just put yourself out there, tell people what you're looking for, and
It's the biggest key.
it's absolutely.
You are guaranteed to succeed.
It's the action. Doesn't matter. You can get all the knowledge, but if you don't take it into action.
At some point, you've got to put it to action. Yeah.
These simplified meetups breed success. Cam.
Cam, you were a long time old guy, yeah. Yep. We don't talk about our competing meetups here, though. We're going to Waltham, not Lowell. I'm just kidding.
Does the syndication money come to the table as debt or equity?
Comes in as equity.
Always?
Yeah. Yeah. If it's debt, it wouldn't really be a syndication. It would be a debt instrument rather than an equity instrument. Yeah, it'd be private lending. First off, I would say consult with a securities attorney on the technicalities of this, but my understanding is, yeah, if you're coming in with for a syndication, it's an equity position, which is why you have to go through, it's considered a security at that point. There's some debt instruments that do become securities, but generally, yeah, not for this. We didn't do any type of debt other than getting debt from the bank on this particular deal. But yeah, again, talk to a securities attorney if you want to know the technicalities there. You could certainly raise, like I think this is definitely in the realm of possibilities. If you knew that this would be a great BRRRR portfolio, you could probably raise the down payment as debt, knowing that within a couple years you could do a cash out refinance. But I think you put yourself in a very high leverage situation, and it's potentially risky. So I kind of preferred in this situation to structure it. And I think when we talked to the Millennium Holding team too, it just made sense to do it as a syndication.
So you had 20% of your money and 80% syndicated?
No, so 75% came from the bank, and then the remaining 25% is what we syndicated. So the general partners on the deal, the sponsors that put the deal together, we put some of that 25% in, and then people like Jeff also came in as limited partners, purely passive, and they came in with the
I
rest.
think the initial equity on that deal, including down payment, lending costs, reserves, was about $1.6 million or $1.8 million.
$1,800,000. $1,860,000.
$1.8 million was the initial equity into the deal, and that came from some of our own money and our limited partners.
What was the total purchase price?
5.5.
5.75.
Yeah. The rest was bank debt.
It was like 5.68, I think. But
Eastern Bank did the rest of the debt.
How much have you sold off?
We sold off 2 with another 4 under agreement, or 4 hitting the market.
Yeah, this year is the
So
plan.
that'll be about, and we closed this in August, so we'll be 6 properties disposed of in about 8 or 9 months.
So the plan is to return capital, continue paying returns. The larger properties we want to keep and really suck them out for cash flow. And so we're going to do that for a couple of years as well. And then on the back end, we've got a couple exit options there. We can try to sell off each building individually, or if it makes sense to sell off the entire portfolio at once, we might do that. That's going to be a decision we make when we get closer to our exit timeline.
It was an interesting portfolio because it had a lot of smaller buildings too, so we could spruce them up, vacate a unit. We've sold a couple to.
Yeah, say again?
Yeah, exactly.
Retail buyers.
Yeah, exactly. It was,
The bigger ones we're gonna keep or do a cash out or something like that. So, yeah.
yeah.
What's one thing in your, I would say, real estate investing career that you learned to systemize in terms of like maximizing efficiency? So to preface that question